Does anybody really know what the fuck is myself? Or what the fuck is yourself? Because people love to put things into categories. And sometimes these categories can seem arbitrary, needless, and pointless, and unhelpful. And they can either be strict or they can be loose. But in the end, it doesn't really matter too much. Because it doesn't really get us closer to the question of what the fuck is myself? Who am I? I mean, who are you? But unfortunately, I think that categories, to some extent, are a necessary evil. And the reason I think that is because of a little thing called categorical logic, which is a school of logical thought that essentially says that all things can be understood in terms of their categories. And whether or not they're good or bad categories, that's another question. But recently I discovered a way of categorizing people that actually makes a whole lot of sense. Generally speaking, there are three ways in which we can categorize people. The first is in the first is in the realm of everybody. So in other words, there are some ways in which everybody is the same. And alternatively, there are some ways in which some people are the same. And last but not least, there are some ways in which nobody is quite the same. Let's talk about that. So remember, we're answering the question, who am I? And we're doing it using our three rules. The first of which is that in some ways, everybody is the same. And our answers, they kind of suck when we stick within this rule, because we get some really trite answers like, we're all human. Who am I? Well, I'm a human being. Oh, okay, well, that's not very helpful. Who am I? Well, I'm carbon, and I'm water. And yeah, they just kind of suck. But we're going to think of some ones that don't suck. We're going to think of some ways, we're going to think of some definitions of who we are that actually are satisfying. And one of those is, one of the things that everybody has is that everybody has needs. And everybody has desires. Even people that you hate, sociopaths, have needs and desires. Narcissists have needs and desires. Your ex-boyfriend or ex-girlfriend or ex-husband or ex-wife that you hate and they hurt you, they have needs and desires. And you have needs and desires. Everybody, every single person has needs and desires. And when we understand this, we can start to be happier because we respect we respect life. We respect all of humanity. And so the answer to the question, who am I? One of the good ways to answer it is that, who am I? I am a person who, I'm going to write this down. I could say, who am I? I am a person who has needs and desires. And this is a very good answer to our question. Now, of course, identifying what those needs and desires are can be a little tricky, but we're going to save that for a different video. So, let's talk about our second rule. So I decided to split this next part into two groups. On the left, we have our second category, being that some people are the same as other people in some ways. And the third being that you aren't quite like anybody else in any other way. And I'd like to start with the third, because it more directly answers the question, who am I? And then our second category, well, it also answers that question, but it does it by first answering the question, who are we? And this is also a very important question. And we'll get back to that, but first, let's talk about who am I as an individual. So you have a personality. And in some ways, your personality is like other people, so we'll put this over here as well. But this is only true for traits. Because when you look at personality as a whole, then you really are a unique person. There's nobody quite like you. And whether or not you have a good or bad personality, this doesn't matter. This also doesn't make sense, because even though people can share the same traits, they'll never have the traits in quite the same way. So if you have two people that are extroverted, well, they're both extroverted, but they're not going to be extroverted qualitatively in quite the same way. So in a sense, we might just be able to cross this off, because it's not literally true. This, on the other hand, your personality actually is uniquely yours, as well as your experiences and your memories, which are uniquely yours. So let's talk about our second category now. And I think our second category is very underrated. And I think it's underrated because we live in an individualistic culture. And if we lived in a more collectivist culture, then this may not be so counterintuitive. Because really, we're figuring out who we are by figuring out who do we belong with, who do we fit in with. And this has to do with culture. And this has to do with community. And this has to do with things like nationality and things of that nature. And so if you identify yourself, if you say that I am a hippie, or I am a businessman, and I go to work wearing a nice suit, and I have a certain set of mannerisms that are associated with businessman, or you could say that you're a jock, or you could say that you're a valley girl, or you could say that you're a nerd, etc. These are all culture. In fact, those would probably be subcultures. And then, of course, we have our communities. And it's a little harder to understand what community is from this perspective of an individualistic culture. And the reason this is because individualistic cultures tend to view themselves as fitting in with the world as a whole, not so much with a specific community. I think that community, sadly, has been a little lost in American culture. Because community gives a sense of purpose, because you do things for your community. You work for something that's greater than yourself, that being your community. And it gives you a sense of, it gives you positive relationships by being a part of this community. And this has to do with nationality as well, because I consider myself an American, but there's also something, I'm just going to make up this word, cityality. It's like nationality, but instead of a nation, it's a city. Because I live in Fort Collins, and there's a community within my own city. I know where I can go in order to hang out with people and to do things around the city. And all of this gives you a sense of community. And it helps us to find who we are by defining who are we. So now we're going to tie it all together, and we're going to look at how we can actually answer the question, who am I? And like I said, first of all, we know that we are people that have needs and desires. And what's one of those needs and desires? Well, one of them is to belong into, and I'm going to put this in quotations, into a group. And of course, how do we do that? Well, we do that through our own unique individual differences, through our roles and strengths, and our own unique personalities and experiences. And there you have it. And so, you may have noticed that all of these things are a little bit foggy. They're a little bit vague. They're kind of hard to answer. And I think that's okay, because to really understand the question, who am I? It takes a lot of introspection. And it takes a lot of self-thought. And it takes a lot of grit. And I hope that I've given you a nice theoretical construct in order to help you understand these things. Who are you and how do you fit into the world? And with that said, this video is done. And I hope you enjoyed watching this, and I hope you got something out of this. My name is John Johnson, and for the last bit of this video, I'm going to do a little bit of a guiltless self-promotion. I'm going to tell you to subscribe. Actually, the truth is I don't really care if you subscribe. I just want you to watch my videos. I mean, that's why subscriptions are there to begin with. It's for people to watch your videos. Subscribers don't matter by themselves. And so instead of subscribe, why don't you, okay, this is kind of a new channel, so I don't have very many videos now, but why don't you tune in next time, and then I'll see you soon.